Some people grow up learning that money is for building a life. Other people grow up learning that money is for preventing disaster. Those are not the same education. You can see the difference in tiny moments, in the way someone freezes before buying a winter coat they actually need, in the way they check their bank app late at night, not because anything changed in the last 10 minutes, but because their body wants proof, in the way a person gets a raise and feels relief for exactly 11 days before the old fear quietly returns, sits back down in the chest and says, "Now make sure you don't lose it." That habit usually gets called being careful, responsible, disciplined. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's something older than discipline. Sometimes it's a child who learned that money was never just money. It was mood. It was tension. It was the volume of your parents' voices in the kitchen after dinner. It was whether the lights stayed on, whether a bill got opened immediately or left face down on the counter like a threat no one wanted to touch, whether a small request could become a problem. And years later, that child grows up, starts making their own income, maybe even does well, and still cannot tell the difference between being financially aware and being emotionally trapped, because the numbers changed. But the lesson didn't. A lot of people think their money habits were formed by logic, by personality, by adulthood. But if you pay attention, really pay attention, you start noticing something unsettling. Many of the ways we handle money are not decisions. They are reenactments. A man in his 30s keeps 3 separate savings accounts. Not because he has a sophisticated system, but because one account never feels enough. A woman can pay for dinner for everyone at the table, tip generously, send gifts to friends, help family members in an emergency. But when it comes to buying herself a decent mattress, she delays for 8 months and sleeps with back pain instead. Another person spends impulsively every time life feels emotionally tight, then hates themselves the next morning and calls it lack of self-control, when what's really happening is older and sadder. Spending is the only moment they feel temporary relief from the pressure of always bracing. The behavior looks different. The wound underneath is often the same. Childhood teaches money in very quiet ways. Not always through lectures, usually through atmosphere. A child doesn't need a formal explanation to understand what money means in a household. They watch, they absorb, they build a nervous system around it. If every purchase in your house came with stress, you may have learned that desire is dangerous. If asking for something was met with silence, irritation, or guilt, you may have learned to minimize your needs before anyone else has to. If money disappeared as quickly as it arrived, if one good week was always followed by a bad surprise, you may have learned that security is never real, only temporary. And if money was used as power, as reward, as punishment, as proof of love, then you may still be confusing financial transactions with emotional transactions long after leaving that house. That's why 2 people can earn the same amount and live inside completely different realities. One sees a paycheck and thinks, "Good, I can plan." The other sees a paycheck and thinks, "Good, how long until something ruins this?" That second thought is not a spreadsheet problem. It's memory wearing a modern outfit. You see it in the adult who feels strangely guilty after buying something useful. Not extravagant, not reckless, useful. They replace worn-out shoes and instead of satisfaction, they feel a low hum of shame. They order the thing they've postponed for months, then almost immediately start compensating in their head. "I shouldn't eat out this week. I need to make up for this. I have to be extra careful now." The purchase is done, but their body behaves like a moral line has been crossed. Why? Because somewhere in childhood, spending stopped meaning exchange and started meaning exposure. Exposure to criticism, exposure to scarcity, exposure to the possibility that someone would say, "We can't afford that," in a tone that made you feel like your wanting itself was a burden. Children are incredibly loyal interpreters. They do not usually conclude, "The adults around me are stressed and under-resourced and emotionally overwhelmed." They conclude, "I should need less, I should ask for less, I should take up less space." And that turns into a money habit that looks almost virtuous from the outside. The person who never buys anything for themselves. The person who keeps the old phone 2 years too long, even though the battery dies by noon. The person who researches a $90 purchase like it's a property acquisition. The person who says, "I'm fine," while using broken things, wearing uncomfortable clothes, tolerating avoidable inconveniences. Because on some deep level, comfort still feels indulgent. Not because they are incapable of buying, because permission never settled in. And then there's the opposite lesson, which looks less respectable, but often comes from the same instability. If money in your childhood felt inconsistent, chaotic, impossible to trust, you may have learned not to hold it too tightly because holding it never guaranteed safety anyway. So you spend quickly. You tell yourself life is short. You treat yourself on bad days. You feel a rush when you click buy now, and then a drop a few hours later when the emotional anesthesia wears off. You might call yourself bad with money, but sometimes that pattern is not about irresponsibility. Sometimes it's what happens when the nervous system stops believing in the future. Saving requires a relationship with tomorrow. And not everyone was raised to feel tomorrow is reliable. This is why shame is such a useless teacher in conversations about money. Shame assumes the behavior is stupid, but a lot of these behaviors are intelligent adaptations to old environments. The child who learned to hide needs was adapting. The child who learned to consume comfort quickly was adapting. The child who obsessed over not wasting anything, who saved wrappers, kept clothes they outgrew, panicked when food was thrown out, noticed every price change at the grocery store, was adapting too. The problem is not that these patterns were irrational. The problem is that they survived longer than the conditions that created them. A person can now have a stable income, a quiet apartment, automatic bill pay, a healthy emergency fund, and still feel a surge of fear at the checkout screen. Not because the fear matches reality, but because the body is not measuring reality. It is recognizing a pattern. That's the part people miss. Money habits are rarely just habits. They are often emotional reflexes attached to symbols. Money becomes safety. Money becomes approval. Money becomes proof that you are not weak, not trapped, not dependent, not like the adults who scared you. Money becomes the thing that lets you finally exhale, which is exactly why so many people cannot exhale even when they technically have enough. Because if money is carrying too much emotional weight, there is no amount that feels stable enough to hold it. You can watch this happen in someone who keeps moving the number. First, it's, I'll relax when I have 5,000 saved. Then it becomes 10, then 20, then 6 months of expenses, then a year. Then maybe after the next promotion, then maybe after one more deal closes. The goal keeps changing because the goal was never actually a financial threshold. It was an attempt to purchase a feeling that money alone cannot produce. Control, safety, the right to stop scanning for danger. But money can reduce risk. It cannot rewrite the original alarm by itself. A lot of adults are trying to use income to solve what was actually an atmosphere. Think about the child who heard one parent say, "We're fine," while watching the others sit at the table doing math with a clenched jaw. Think about the kid in the back seat when adults thought they were not listening, hearing words like overdue, late fee, cutback, not this month. Think about the teenager who pretended not to want the class trip because they could already feel the tension the request would create. Think about the little rituals that get built from moments like that. Asking for nothing, wanting nothing, preparing disappointment before it arrives. Those rituals grow up with you. They become the adult who opens the restaurant menu and looks at the right side first. The adult who can afford the direct flight, but still picks the exhausting one with the layover because paying more for ease feels morally suspicious. The adult who lets toothpaste run out completely, slices the tube open, scrapes the corners, and feels weirdly proud of suffering small discomforts. The adult who says, "I'm just not a big spender," without noticing that the sentence carries both identity and defense. Sometimes frugality is wisdom. Sometimes it is an old fear wearing the mask of virtue. And the hardest part is that fear-based habits are often rewarded by the world. People praise restraint. They admire self-denial. They call you grounded, practical, low maintenance. Very few people can see when restraint has stopped being a choice and become a prison. Very few people notice when someone's good with money identity is built on chronic deprivation, on never letting themselves feel safe enough to soften, enjoy, replace, upgrade, rest. There are people who have not bought themselves anything without guilt in 15 years. There are people who cannot enjoy a vacation they fully paid for because every pleasant moment is haunted by an inner accountant. There are people who have more stability than their parents ever had and still live emotionally as if one wrong purchase could collapse the floor. That is not greed. That is not even really about money. That is a nervous system that still thinks love, safety, and survival are conditional. And then there is another layer, a quieter one. Sometimes the money habit you learned as a child was not scarcity itself, but secrecy. Maybe no one explained anything. You just felt the tension, but were given no language. Maybe adults acted normal in public and panicked in private. Maybe money was one of those subjects everybody orbited, but nobody addressed directly. So you became an adult who hates looking at finances. Not because you are careless, because vagueness feels familiar, because clarity feels like the moment before bad news. Some people procrastinate budgeting for the same reason other people avoid medical tests. They would rather live in floating dread than in confirmed reality. That avoidance isn't laziness, it's emotional association. If numbers once meant fear, opening the spreadsheet can feel like reopening the old house. Other people go the opposite way. They track every cent. They refresh investment apps 4 times a day. They know exactly how much came in, went out, moved, changed, dropped, increased. They call it staying informed. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's hypervigilance with a finance aesthetic. It looks impressive because anxiety often does. Anxiety can be neat. Anxiety can be organized. Anxiety can have color-coded tabs. But peace is not the same thing as constant monitoring. You can be informed without being haunted. That distinction matters. Because once you understand that your money habit may have been learned emotionally, not logically, something shifts. You stop asking only, is this behavior smart? And start asking a more revealing question, what does this behavior help me avoid feeling? That question changes everything. Why do you delay replacing things that are clearly making your life harder? Why do you feel guilty after spending on yourself but not on others? Why do you need an absurdly high number in the bank before you let yourself rest? Why do you spend most recklessly when you feel most unseen? Why do you avoid checking your balance when you already know avoidance makes it worse? Those are not just financial questions, they are psychological ones. And the answers are often painfully intimate. Maybe saving makes you feel untouchable. Maybe overspending makes you feel briefly alive. Maybe underspending lets you maintain the identity of the easy person who never causes trouble. Maybe obsessing over money gives you the illusion that nothing can blindside you again. Maybe refusing pleasure before necessity is fully satisfied is how you learn to earn your place in the world. Every habit protects something, even the ones that hurt you. That's why breaking a money pattern can feel strangely disorienting, even when the new behavior is healthier. A person who starts spending on themselves appropriately may feel reckless at first. A person who begins checking their finances calmly may feel dread before they feel relief. A person who stops panic saving and starts living with more balance may feel exposed, as if they are becoming irresponsible, when in reality they are just becoming less ruled by fear. Healing often feels wrong before it feels right, especially when your old pain had excellent manners and looked like discipline. Take someone who grew up with a parent who constantly said, "We can't waste money," but what the child really absorbed was, mistakes are expensive and comfort is negotiable. That child may become an adult who overthinks every purchase, apologizes for every need, and treats convenience like moral failure. They will tell themselves they are just being smart, but watch closely. They are not calm. They are braced. Or take someone else whose household swung between feast and famine. On payday, there was relief, takeout, optimism, maybe even generosity. By the end of the month, there was tension, silence, irritation. That child may become an adult who cycles between indulgence and restriction, abundance and punishment. Spend freely, regret deeply, clamp down, repeat. Not because they lack character, because chaos became the rhythm they know. What we call a habit is often a biography, and biographies do not change through criticism alone. They change when they are finally understood. That doesn't mean blaming your parents forever. Most people were passing down what they themselves never got to question. Scarcity, fear, guilt, secrecy, over-control, emotional spending. These patterns usually have ancestry. Someone else learned them first. Someone else built a home around them. Someone else confused survival strategies with personality and handed them to the next person as normal. But understanding the inheritance matters because what is unnamed usually gets mistaken for identity. You think, I'm just stingy, or I'm just impulsive, or I'm just anxious about money, or I've always been like this. No, you learned a style of safety, and what is learned can be examined. Maybe not instantly changed, but examined. That examination starts in surprisingly ordinary places. The next time you hesitate over a simple purchase, notice the voice that shows up. Is it really yours? Or is it older, sharper, heavier than the present moment deserves? The next time you feel a hit of panic after spending, ask whether the spending was actually dangerous or whether it merely activated an ancient association between having needs and causing stress. The next time you check your accounts for the 5th time in a day, ask whether you are seeking information or seeking sedation. And the next time you deny yourself something small that would genuinely improve your life, pause before you call it maturity. Sometimes maturity is restraint. Sometimes maturity is finally admitting that deprivation has become part of your self-image. That is the uncomfortable truth. Some people do not just fear being poor, they fear becoming the kind of person who allows themselves ease. Because ease was never modeled as safe, there's a reason this can feel so deep. Money touches survival, yes, but it also touches dignity, choice, dependency, visibility. A child notices who gets to ask, who gets denied, who gets blamed, who gets rescued, who gets to relax. Those observations become moral architecture. You don't just learn what money buys, you learn what money means about a person. Responsible, burdensome, successful, selfish, safe, careless, needed, trapped. Then you grow up and keep trying to prove, through financial behavior, that you are the right kind of person. Sometimes that is the real exhaustion. Not earning money, not saving it, not spending it, proving innocence through it, proving you are not too much, proving you are not foolish, proving you are not one emergency away from humiliation, proving you deserve to leave the life you came from, proving you will never need anyone the way someone once needed too much. That is a heavy job for a bank account. Too heavy, because no number can fully settle a question that belongs to identity. At some point, the shift is not just financial, it is emotional. You begin separating present reality from past conditioning. You learn that enough is not only a number, it is also a capacity to feel relative safety without immediately inventing a new threat. You learn that buying something necessary is not a moral failure, that saving money is not the same as worshiping security, that generosity toward yourself is not betrayal. That caution is useful, but fear should not be your financial advisor. And maybe the most powerful question is not, how do I become better with money? Maybe it is, what did money have to mean in my childhood for me to act like this now? Because once that answer becomes clear, the shame starts losing authority. You begin seeing the pattern instead of becoming the pattern. You notice that the panic after spending is old. The numbness before checking your balance is old. The thrill of impulsive relief is old. The guilt around wanting more ease is old. Familiar does not mean true. Inherited does not mean permanent. And maybe that is where real change starts. Not with a harsher budget, not with a more punishing plan, but with the moment you catch yourself inside an old reflex and realize, this was once protective, but it is not the whole story anymore. That realization is quiet, but it is powerful. Because the child in you learned money as survival. The adult in you gets to learn it again as choice. Not unlimited choice, not fantasy, not denial, just something gentler and more honest. A tool, a resource, a form of preparation, a way to support a life, not a constant referendum on whether you are safe enough to exist. So the next time you open your bank app at midnight, or hesitate over replacing the thing that stopped working months ago, or feel your chest tighten after a perfectly reasonable purchase, don't rush straight to self-judgment. Pause and ask yourself what part of you thinks this moment is much bigger than it is. Because maybe the money habit you learned as a child was never really about money. Maybe it was about learning how to survive uncertainty without control, how to shrink before becoming a burden, how to prepare for loss before joy had a chance to settle, how to treat relief like something temporary and dangerous. If that's true, Then the work is deeper than spend less or save more. The work is noticing when your life is being organized by an old emergency that no longer lives in the room. And that may be the most adult financial skill of all. Not earning more, not optimizing harder, not denying yourself better, but finally learning the difference between protecting your future and obeying your past.